Good evening. This is Richard Lowe with Author Talks. I'm the Writing King. I'm a ghostwriter, a book coach, and a LinkedIn branding expert. And I'm here with Mary Wong, and we're going to talk about her books and her life and all the exciting things she has going on. Mary, how are you tonight?
I'm great, thanks. It's actually morning where I am. I'm here in Australia, so we're on the other side of the world. It's a beautiful,
Yeah,
sparkly day.
it's 7 p.m. here, and we have a massive thunderstorm going on in the background. So if you hear the lightning and
Oh,
thunder,
no.
you know what it is.
Oh, I love it.
It's Florida, though. We get those. We get these every day now.
Mm.
It says here in this intro that you're fascinated with leadership and you've studied and applied it for over 20 years. Why don't we start from that point?
Yeah, sure. Leadership's something that's always grabbed me. I can remember I was just a child listening to Nelson Mandela speak on the TV one time and was just so fascinated by this man and who he was and what it was that he had that made people just stop and listen and be so enthralled with him. And it's always been something that's just fascinated me. I've always has this sense of looking in from the outside and going, why is it that this person is so enigmatic? What makes them something that people just want to listen to, want to hear from, want to follow, want to do what it is that they say? And always, my entire life, have done that. Now, I was just saying before, I'm nearly 60. So that's a long time since I first started that. But it's been the last 20 years or so that I've been putting formal study into it and really making myself more aware, not just from my own perspective, but from the perspective of those who've studied it and been scholars of leadership for many years. And it's a study that I don't think I'll ever stop because I just love it so much. I enjoy it so much being part of that growth thing where you can look at it and go, wow, there's so much more to what I'm capable of, and not just what I'm capable of, but what the people around me are capable of, and what we can do with the world when we apply what we've learned and where we've grown and use that to help other people.
Very good. Yeah, I was pretty much a leader in the tech field for 33 years and then became a ghostwriter. And I had trouble with leadership because I was highly introverted and
Mm,
very, very shy. So it kind of got in the way. Leadership and shyness don't really go together well. At least that's my experience. I'm sure there are shy people who are leaders. I broke that by becoming a photographer and going out and photographing about 1,200 people and deciding not to be shy anymore and not to be so introverted. I still like being at home as opposed to being out, but I'm really not a party person. But yeah, leadership is interesting because you're influencing other people to go in the right direction.
right direction.
And I've found that people have such different definitions of leadership that, and I think that many of them have it, in my opinion, incorrect. Leadership is simply causing one or more people to go into a certain direction. You're leading them. And how you do that is what most people describe as leadership is actually the how and not the what. So,
Mm. Yes,
how do you
it's
do it?
very hard to quantify. A lot of people can't quantify leadership. If you say, what is leadership and ask them for a definition, a lot of people can't quantify it because it's so many things. It's so there's so many aspects and important parts to it that create a leader, that create that charisma that a leader has that makes people want to know what they're doing and want to be part of it and get engaged with their cause. I think I think in a nutshell, what you've said is pretty much it. It is around having the ability to influence or persuade people in a certain direction. I like to think that it's also the ability to engage people and have them enthusiastic, not just following, but being enthusiastic and even driving the cause that you have, whatever that cause is as a leader that you're having, that they become enthused about it and want to be part of it, not just following because they're being sheep.
Well, yeah, that's part of leadership is getting them to move in the right direction is part of getting them enthused because I think holding a whip generally doesn't work for people, especially in the modern age. I mean, you can always look at old times, and that may have worked in the past, and it may still work in areas in the world, but in modern society, modern democracies at least, it doesn't tend to work very well. Although sometimes people have a tendency to get deluded by so-called leaders,
Mm,
um,
mm.
and treat them as authority figures. And there's things like the authority bias, and I study logical fallacies and things. And authority bias is a big one, where you say you think this person is the authority, so he must be right, he or she must be right, and you follow them without question. They are leading people, but they are leading people because they um, they might be a bad example of leadership. And there are many, many, many examples of that. I mean, Adolf Hitler was, and people followed him to the death. Joseph
Mm.
Stalin. I mean, those are old ones, probably non-controversial. That people
Yes, we'll
followed.
stay away from the modern ones, shall we?
Yes, certainly. I don't want to get into politics or anything, but
No, no. I actually find that politics isn't a great example when we're talking leadership, because in politics it is more around a plastic perversion, if you will, of who the person is. It's what they allow you to see. It's not them being authentic. And that doesn't matter what side of politics you're on. The same machine runs each one. It's the same sort of publicity machine. And I think a big problem that the world's facing right now is that we're so easily swayed by what we see in things like social media, and this plastic idea of who we actually are. It's not us. We have to be real if we want to be a leader. We have to be real and authentic and absolutely honest and transparent about who we are. And in politics, that doesn't happen. In politics, it's all about we have this wish for power. We need to stay in power, so let's do whatever we have to do to get there. And that's not leadership.
well, I read an article lately, and I can't remember what it was or who wrote it, but I did read it, that said that the problem with the world now is we're being led by psychopaths. And you know, I'm not saying all leaders are psychopaths. I'm not sure saying anything. I'm not making any judgment on any particular leader. But if you look around, as you say, politicians don't tend to be interested in the people. They're interested
Mm,
in they're
themselves.
they're not interested in their constituents. They're interested in themselves, or they're interested in the people they represent, meaning the people who pay them.
Mm.
So the
And
corporations pay the
maintaining
most money,
power.
and maintaining
Yeah,
power, some semblance of
absolutely.
power. Um,
I'm going to give you another word to add into that statement, where you said the problem with the world is we're being led by psychopaths. I would say that the problem with the world is that we are allowing ourselves to be led by psychopaths, because every one of us has the opportunity and the ability to make our own decisions. And making informed decisions is very important. But to do that, it requires us to open our eyes to where we're looking. And I know that both sides of the argument, there's not only two sides, there's more than two sides to any of these sorts of conversations, but a lot of them on either side are being funneled into their belief system because of things like, for example, algorithms on Facebook. If you
mhm.
like a certain sort of post, you are directed towards those kind of posts. If you dislike a certain sort of post and say, I don't want to see this, you don't have to see it. And we're being blinded to what's actually going on by ignoring half of what's going on, or at least half of what's going on, and getting this, what we call confirmation bias, where our bias is being confirmed by the things that we're seeing, the articles that we're seeing. And of course, the younger generation, the ones who are going through school now, are actually being taught how to research things properly, so that they're not just researching what they want to believe in, that they look at, okay, is this thing that I'm looking at real? There's an awful lot. Once the internet came in, there's so much stuff that was just put online by anyone and everyone as being, real. I can publish my own newspaper article and say it's real,
Mm-hmm.
and people could open it anywhere, and I could write any sort of rubbish in there, and people anywhere can open it and go, see, it's real. I can share that on Facebook. I know it's real. See, this person's an authority. How do they know that? Have they actually looked into who I am? Have
I
they
actually
actually
have
found out about me? No, they've read what they wanted to see and put it up there, and that's what's happening. And
I
it's
have an
dangerous.
example of that from my own life. I was in a discussion with somebody who had different politics than me, and he said, "Well, um, you should look." So I looked and came to the opposite conclusion of him as him, totally the opposite. And I'm not going to get into the details because I don't want to get into the
Yeah.
politics. And he was shocked. How could you not come to this conclusion? I said, well, how did you come to your conclusion? I mean, I went out there and researched. I read, actually, it was a court case. I read the entire court case from the beginning, all the transcripts. I read the appeals. I read the Supreme Court case. I read everything. And I came to the conclusion that in this case, the Supreme Court made the correct decision. And because the appeals all lost, and the Supreme Court said, no, we're not gonna overturn this. And he was shocked. He's like, well, the Supreme Court's all bad, and they're corrupt and stuff like that. And I said, well, actually, I read the decision. It was like 140 pages, and they were going to great lengths to try and fall on the side of the opposite side, but they couldn't because of this and this and this. And it was just, so where did you get your information? I mean, I got mine from the official transcripts, which is as close as you can get to these original, unless they recorded it, which they didn't. They didn't in those days. And he said, well, I read it off the political website from my particular party, and that's what it said to say. I said, so did you do any research at all? Well, no, of course not. Oh, well, okay. You just proved my point.
Yeah. I'd
How
be
about,
curious if that person was about the same age group as us.
no, he was in his mid-20s at the time.
Mid-20s. Wow. Because most of the ones who are that young are actually looking closer and looking at the research. I know from my son's 22, and he's always like, oh, mum, yeah, I'll say to him, oh, I was reading this, and he'll go, oh, yeah, but have you looked at that, and he'll give me a whole list of things to go, and I love it, actually. It's really handy, because I'll be going, oh, where am I going to find that information to find out whether or not this is true or not? And I'll just say to him, and he'll go, okay, you've got to look at this and this and this and this and this. He just gives me a list. And so I'll go and look at that list, and then while I'm looking at that list, I'll get other little rabbit holes to go down and look at things as well, and then make my decision from a more informed perspective. My favorite way to make a decision is to actually be in the room when the thing happens, but most of us aren't. So in most cases, we have to reserve our opinion to a degree, because we weren't there when it happened. We didn't see it. And then, of course, there's the added benefit of our own perceptions and the filters that we look at things in. So we have to, even if we are in the room, have to consider, were we looking at it through a particular lens? Was there something that happened to us in our life that makes us look at it in a different way? So there's so much to that sort of thing. Like, how do we approach this stuff? And I think that constant questioning of yourself and your own opinion, not to the point where it takes away your confidence, but to the point where it makes you go, am I right about this, or am I not right about this? So that you're open to listen and to look and to research, rather than to go, no, I'm absolutely right, full stop. Because when you're absolutely right, full stop, you close yourself off to amazing learning experiences. But when you are open, you learn so much. And one of the things that we as humans have forgotten how to do is to say, wow, you know what, I was wrong about that.
Yeah,
We
well,
have this idea
I was
of
married, so I know
perfection.
about being wrong. I was always
I
wrong,
am
according
married,
to
and I know about being wrong.
I was always wrong, according to my late wife. I was constantly wrong. Um, yeah,
Mm,
this is an interesting subject that I spend a lot of time on. The phenomenon that you mentioned of on the internet is the result of advertising. They're called echo chambers, and advertising created that so that you would get the ads that were of your interest.
mm,
It seemed like a pretty harmless thing. If you're watching a movie and you're interested in Chevy trucks, you should see, and buying a Chevy truck, you should see an ad about Chevy trucks.
yep.
Well, it spilled over into the content, and that's where it went wacko. I mean, I'm not a big fan of advertising. I got ad blockers on everything, but I can. And I curse on my TV because it doesn't have an ad blocker. And every time YouTube puts up its stupid ad interrupting the movie, I curse at it. But I'm watching YouTube, so I guess I got to compensate them somehow. That's the rational part of me, um, or the irrational part, whichever.
I
But
actually pay for the premium one so I don't have to watch it.
yeah, over here it's a little expensive. I think it's $16 here in the States and a month, and that's
Mm.
quite a bit of money for no ads. But I tend to buy DVDs and Blu-rays rather than watching streaming because I'm not interested in the bias of the streaming service. That kind of happened. I'm a little bit older and I have 3,500 Blu-rays, so I'm not going to throw them away. And B, they've been censoring movies and things like all of the Disney cartoons. A lot of them have been censored to take out the smoking scenes. That cuts out a big part of the meaning of the cartoons. They've been censored for all kinds of things, and I'm not going to watch a censored version of something that was made in the 1930s. It was a different time. They smoked a lot then.
It was.
You
Yes,
got to
they
understand.
did. Actually, I had a great conversation with some people last night around this exact same thing. We were talking about comedy and how comedy has changed, and we were talking from the perspective of people around about the age of the mid-50s to 70s or so. We were talking around, what did we watch as kids and what we loved and thought was fantastically funny as kids. And I related an experience I had recently. I remember when the Crocodile Dundee movies came out. A lot of
Oh yeah.
people over there know the Crocodile Dundee, and we loved them, and we laughed and laughed. And my son, when he was about 16, 17, he picked up a knife to cut some vegetables and went, "Look, I've got a knife." And I went, "That's not a knife." And he looked at me and went, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, I've just gone, "Oh my gosh, I've neglected your training, your education. I've never let you watch Crocodile Dundee. I have to get that out so you can watch it." And I went and got it, put it on the TV, and we sat down to watch it. And about 5 minutes in, he turned around and looked at me and said, "What is this sexist rubbish you have me watching, Mum?" And I had been sitting there myself going, "Wow, I remember when I thought this was really funny. And now I don't. Now I'm not buying into it. I mean, I can see how it was funny when we were growing up, but society has changed so much since then." And in this conversation that we were having last night, they were talking about Benny Hill, for example. Now, Benny Hill, the master of the comedic facial gesture, but what he was doing was really terrible. It was getting people encouraged to be very sexist and very objectifying behavior and all that sort of thing, but hilarious in the day. But now we look at it and go, "Oh, that's terrible. How do people watch this stuff?" Isn't it amazing how much we've changed?
Well, Benny Hill was based on vaudeville and burlesque, and those things have
Mm,
pretty much died these days. They've
yeah.
gone by the wayside, and people aren't used to that. I've watched Benny Hill. In fact, I have the entire series on DVD, and that's hard to find um, at a reasonable
It would
price.
be.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
25 DVDs or something like that. It's some outrageous number of DVDs, and I'm not amused by them. Not just because of the racism and stuff. I mean, that can be funny sometimes in context. I mean, Blazing Saddles is an example of a movie that's just hilarious from front to back. Um, and I've watched it with black people. I watched I like to watch reacting videos, and there's black people watching Blazing Saddles. If anybody's interested, it's on the surface one of the most racist movies ever made, but it's actually satirizing racism and trying to show how stupid it is by
Yeah.
exaggerating it. And it's hilarious all the way through. But Benny Hill, the jokes just fall flat, partially because some of them are political and I don't understand the
Mm,
politics, and partially because a lot of them are just stupid nowadays. But when I was
mm.
younger, especially, I think that came out when I was really young, like Benny Hill and what's the other one? Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Monty Python. I never ever understood Monty Python, even when I was younger and it was in vogue and everyone was saying, "Oh my gosh, it's hilarious." There've been a couple of little snippets that I've thought that's really funny, but most of it I've just gone, "What on earth were they on?" It's never actually made
Here,
sense to me.
here's a key point that might help it make sense. Benny Hill perfected the art of, and they were the first to do this, of having jokes without punchlines. And if you're used to joke with punchlines, they don't make any sense. But if you I've got the whole mega collection of Benny Hill of Monty Python. They actually went through frame by frame and repainted all of the scenes and fixed all of the bad part, because they're very decayed. They're gorgeous. And now I watch and go, why did I buy this? Because it's just, I don't even understand, because it's all politics. I don't even understand these jokes. And it's British politics, even worse, not even US politics. I don't understand any of this. I don't know who these people are, because it's very specific at times. And the jokes, there are no punchlines, so most of them don't make sense. The movies actually are kind of funny. Monty
Mm.
Python's Life of Brian and the Holy Grail, the Holy Grail one, I forget the name. Those are actually mildly funny to me. They used to be hilarious, but it's the same thing. And I don't think it's an I'm getting older thing. I think it's just they actually never were that funny. They were
Mm.
shocking back then,
Mm.
and they're not shocking
Mm.
anymore. They're more just, this just isn't good.
Yes, and how sad is it that we as a society aren't as easily shocked as we once were? That says a lot about what we see and what we do in life these days compared to what we did. I remember looking at my mum, talking with my mum about her growing up and the things that they got to see and do. And, it actually might even tie in with what we've just been talking about, with how people are so easily influenced with advertising and things like that. When mum used to talk about, to see the news, you had to go to the movie theatre. It wasn't, or listen to the radio. You didn't, it wasn't something that was constantly in your face, that was constantly available to you. So you would hear it once a day on the bulletin, or you would read it in the paper, which was the previous day's bulletin all printed, or you would go to the movies and see the latest updates on the movies, which were more kind of short doco type presentations. And that was it. And what you saw was what you were told was truth, and there was no reason to disbelieve that, because nobody questioned anything. Nobody, you were just told that this is what's going on, so that's what you see. You know, and she said there was no questioning. So when advertising came out and it was coming up on screens or in the papers, there was this presumption that what they were showing you was real. And we as children were brought up by parents who had that belief system, who had that presumption that everything's real. So we had ingrained, because when we're tiny, our brains are like sponges. We'll take in absolutely everything around us and be modeled by the people around us. In that first couple of years in particular, whatever happens to us, and whatever belief systems and things surround us, it's very difficult to break out of that unless you go into very concerted effort to change your neural pathways. So the information that we gained from our parents as children, their belief systems around what was true and what was correct, that was ingrained into us. And then we grew up believing stuff like that. Now, not everybody has had the opportunity. In fact, very few people comparatively have had the opportunity to do that neural pathway work where they really learnt to make their own mind up about who they are, and really learnt to not just jump to, even subconsciously jump to a conclusion that what they're seeing is correct. And that's part of the reason that all of this has happened. It's a generational thing that's come down. It's the way that society has evolved. It's the way that our brains work and the way that we absorb things around us, right through until it's about 12 years old, when all of those bits of spongy fiber between the pathways start to dissolve. That period of time up until that age, we just are absorptions. We're little sea sponges that absorb anything around us. It just comes straight into us. So that's what we learn, because that's how society was 50, 60 years ago. And that's why people of our generation accept it very quickly. And what we have done is train that into our own children. So for the people who are now saying, hang on, we've got to have another closer look at this. And I'm not going to go into conspiracy theories and things like that. I mean, because some of them are too easily swayed in the other direction as well. But people are now questioning what the narrative is. They're questioning what they're being told, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that we question. We have to be careful, though, that we are looking at the whole picture, not just that part we're being funneled into, because that's kind of how it all happens. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things they stopped teaching here in the States was logical thinking. It used to be when I was in school, when I went to college, The first class I took was logical fallacies and cognitive biases and how to separate them. They don't teach that anymore here in the States. I don't know about where you are, and that's important. There's literally 50 or 60 or maybe even 100 logical fallacies, and there's dozens of cognitive biases, and they form how you think. Cognitive biases tend to be formed earlier in life. Those come from that first couple of years. Like mother says, never cross the road. That's so then you have this bias all along, or never talk to strangers. That's a cognitive bias. Don't talk to strangers. That's just dumb. You're not going to survive in life very long not ever talking to a stranger.
Mm.
Maybe
It comes from
having
fear, right?
comes from your parents not wanting to get run over by a car, probably.
Exactly. So
When
it's a
you're a
fear.
2-year-old.
It's a fear that something bad might happen to you if I'm not there to protect you. So I'm telling you, don't do that. But then we as adults have to remember that what we were taught as children was to protect us as children. And
Yeah,
then
but
sometimes there's
unfortunately,
a point where we need to flip that and go, hang on a moment. Is that a instruction to keep me safe as a child? Or is it an instruction that I need to carry throughout my life? And that's something that a lot of us don't question as well.
well, it's hard to question because it's buried deep in that 1 to 2-year-old time frame. And
Mm.
I found that kind of thing, you need therapy to work with a therapist or
Can
something, a
do.
counselor, to find it and go, oh, okay, yeah, my mom told me not to jump in front of cars when I was a kid. That okay, I don't have to obey. Well, I probably shouldn't jump in front of cars, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's reasonable, right?
But I should probably apply this logically to each situation I'm in,
Yes.
rather than
Yes.
applying it as a blanket statement. And those are learned early. And there's lots of
Mm.
cognitive bias. Authority bias is one we mentioned earlier, and that's where you believe in authority just because. I mean, what on earth? Michael Jordan is one of the greatest basketball. He is the greatest basketball player that ever lived, and he's a great person. But what does he know about sneakers? You know,
Yeah.
he 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 he's just a spokesperson. So his authority there's no authority. Or to make a more pertinent example, here we had a Playboy bunny who said that vaccines were bad, and everybody was saying this bunny said vaccines were bad. She's a friggin' Playboy bunny. What would she know about vaccines? Now, I'm not saying vaccines are good. I'm not saying they're bad. I have my own opinion, but that's not the right authority for
Yeah. Who is the
vaccine.
authority we're listening to?
Who is the authority? That's the authority bias. So you're
Mm.
just listening to this person because this person said you've accepted them as an authority. A lot of politicians become authorities. They shouldn't be. Um, why on earth would a politician be an authority on climate change? They're politicians. If they have a
With
nice
agendas, might I add.
with agendas, but if they have some climate scientists behind them and climate people talking with them and so forth, their authority grows. Then they use
Mm.
these other things. So you have to look at the whole picture and look and see if you've got any of these logical fallacies and cognitive biases going in and you always do. I watched or listened to a fascinating course. It's I think it's called Great Courses, and they have a course there on logical fallacies and cognitive bias. And they go through this group of people that climbed Mount Everest, and all of them died. And why did they die? And they just went through all the logical fallacies and cognitive biases all the way up the slope, and how it led to the death of each and every single person going up there because they just had these false beliefs. And life is the same way. It might seem harmless to be following somebody because they recommend Nike shoes and you're just buying shoes. But when you apply that to things like buying a car and spending $70,000 now on a car, I don't know why anybody spends $70,000 on a car. That just seems silly to me, but they do. Apparently, it's pretty popular these days with, I don't know, or spending your money or whatever. Maybe you should look at actual authorities, or maybe you should determine whether or not you got any of these other biases, and there are a lot of them. And
Mm. It's the perception of the superstar knowing and being everything, like the influencer. Why would the superstar be an influencer? It's what you were saying about Michael Jordan, for example. Why would some Tom Cruise, for example, who everyone knows and love, why would Tom Cruise be an authority on, I don't know, underpants? And the reason I'm thinking of that is that Risky Business scene. That what makes me think about them. But why would he be? He's just a bloke like any other bloke, and just a man like any other man. Why does that make him a superstar? Why does
Well, I
that
would,
make him something special? He's very good at his craft. He's very good at his craft. And, was very good looking as a young guy. I don't think he's all that hot these days. That's not my cup of tea, but that's a whole different story. But that's the thing, isn't it? Like we get this perception that someone is a superstar, therefore they must know all, be all, and we allow ourselves to be so easily influenced by all of that, and that just doesn't make sense. So part of leadership is learning how not to be easily influenced by the wrong things and distracted by that noise that's everywhere, that white noise that's everywhere in society now. Learning to be able to know what you're about, to be open to other ideas and opinions and to growth and to learning and to being able to apologize as well when we get it wrong, because, hey, we are human and every single one of us gets it wrong at some point, every one of us. And like you say, every one of us has our biases, but knowing what your biases are and understanding and being aware of that, like some of the stuff that I do in my leadership work, I do a 360 emotional intelligence profiling tool, which is just phenomenal, because what it shows people when they go through it, when they do the tool and they sit there, and then we do some coaching around, all right, what came out, what stands out for you there. It's coaching. I'm going to go on a hobby horse for a second here. A lot of people think coaching is sitting there and telling people what to do. It's not. Coaching, real coaching, executive proper coaching, is where you question and you ask the questions that facilitate the answers that come from within that person. It's not guiding a person with what you believe is correct. It's helping them to find that inner guide, that inner sense and that understanding for themselves. And then if they don't have that understanding for themselves, helping them to work out where they might find it, how they might find it, how else they could do things so that they find those sorts of stuff. So when I'm working through this 360 with people, I'll say to them, well, this is how the profile works. These are the little things, and these are what these things mean. And, for example, self-awareness, this is what self-awareness is, and this is how it would manifest within different situations in your life. Tell me what stands out for you around what's come up in that profile response. And then that person gets to talk about, and quite often, as somebody looking at a profile before I debrief, I'll think, that could be this, that could be that. When you ask them, they go, oh, it's this, and it's a mile away from what you thought it might possibly be. Because when you look at it, you might think about those things, but only as an idea, as a prompt for yourself when you're coaching them to remember to ask questions around those sorts of things to make sure that it's not, but allow them to tell you what it is, because within them, they know what's right and what's wrong within their life, but they aren't necessarily consciously aware of it until they get asked the right question that makes them go, oh, I've just realized, oh, that's what that is, and that's why that's happening. And then there's the question, so what could you do about that? How is that affecting you? How else could you do that? What else could you do about that? How else could you look at that? And that's when they go, I'm going to do that. And for them, whatever that block has been, they're able to then move forward from it and grow as a person because of it, just by being asked the right question from someone who's open to allowing it to be whatever is right for them. And it's important, particularly if we're talking leadership, but important for every human in the world, regardless. I believe every human is a leader at some point, at some place in their life. So it is important for us to allow them to be their individual self, because our genius is in our individuality. And you were saying earlier about being shy as a leader, or being introverted and shy. So introversion and shyness are two different things.
of course.
So you can be a shy introvert. You can also be a shy extrovert. So introversion is about getting your energy from being alone, from being in your own space without people and noise and clutter around you. That's where you recharge. That's where you
That's
get
me.
your energy back. Yeah. And, and that's me sometimes. And we all have our moments of introversion. We all have our moments where we just go, enough, I just need some time alone to let my head clear, right? It doesn't matter how extroverted we are. Very few people don't have those moments. And what we have to realize and remember as people working with people, everybody's different, everybody has their level on the scale where they sit, is that we also can go into that space even if it's not our regular space that we sit in. So it's important for us to remember that. And with introversion, that's introversion. With shyness, something has happened that makes us at some point in some place, whether it's something conscious or unconscious, it may have even happened before we were 1 year old, so we don't even have an idea, but something has happened in our life that we carry some trauma from. And usually with that sort of thing, sometimes you can get through that without any therapy. Sometimes you need therapy. I didn't realize what was holding me back. As a child, I was very badly bullied. I knew that was part of it. I had an experience with a boy with holding guns to my head when I was 11, telling me he was going to kill me if I couldn't find my shoes that he'd hidden, things like that. And then being told by the school principal that I'd lied about it, which said to me, "You nobody wants to know anything about you. Nobody wants to hear your truth. Nobody wants to, don't bother talking about whatever's happening to you." And that led to a series of very complicated things growing up, and a whole lot of things that if I'd spoken out about, the outcomes would have been a whole lot better. I can look back on all of that now comfortably without a problem because I've done therapy around it. But there was always something that was still holding me back, and I couldn't work out what it was. And I discovered that before I was 2 years old, that so he wasn't actually my grandfather, he was my pop. My grandmother remarried. So because the first husband had died very young and she remarried. And Pop had come back from the war with a psychological problem. They used to call it shell shock, but with trauma, with PTSD. And he had come back from the war with this trauma. He always carried a knife and a rope in his pocket. Well, Pop did himself in publicly in a park back in the late 60s, when if somebody in the family had suicided, that was, a great shame on the family and a huge stigma. I wasn't aware of any of that, but that happened before I was 2 years old. And when I started working through family history and working through what else has happened in the family, what else has gone on, and that was just through interest. And I found that out. I went, oh, now I get it. Now I get why, because I had always felt like I'd been rejected. Even as a tiny child, I couldn't work out why I'd felt like I was being rejected. Why did I feel like no one loved me? And it would have been around my mother's distress and grief and having to deal with all of that when I was a tiny child, and she wouldn't have been feeling it. She wouldn't have been, and which would be completely reasonable, wouldn't have been feeling like, oh gosh, I need to look after this child, I need to do these things for this child. She'd have been caught in her own world of grief and distress and trying to help her mother and everything else that went around that. And then going to school, the bullying that happened was also part of that, came from the teachers who were adults in a society where there was a massive stigma around any kind of mental health issue. So because there was a mental health issue in the family, we then became the stigmatized family. I was a precocious, chatty child, and they needed to shut me up and push me down to keep me quiet. So once they started bullying, all the others started bullying. And this is the leadership stuff, right? This is the society being led by a authority figure who was the teacher. So that the children were being led by the teacher and the teacher's behavior. And that's how it played out. Now, I'm past all of that now because of the work that I did. But if I hadn't done work on that, I wouldn't be past it. But it's really interesting because I've always had this curious, inquiring mind that liked to look in from the outside. Even as a child, I can remember lying in bed as a 8, 9, 10-year-old and thinking about, if I was an alien out in a spacecraft looking down at the world, what would I be seeing? And I always had that sort of perspective of looking in from the outside, which has it because I'm so curious and because I like to look at things and think, how do we actually look to someone looking in? And it's just a fascinating study to look at. Who are we as a society? How do we move forward as a society? How are we so easily led? How are we so easily influenced? Why are we so easily influenced? And what could we do better? What could we do differently? I actually watched the Barbie movie a couple of weeks ago, and boy, is there some comment on that in there. Have you seen it? It's incredible.
No, I have not seen it, but
You've not seen it?
no, I
I don't
probably
know if I
won't.
even liked the movie as such. I wasn't fond of the storyline. I thought it was a bit, yeah, it's a bit boring. It's a bit nothing. But the actual social commentary in it was phenomenal and made you go, blimey, wow. It really, I've been pondering on it ever since watching the movie. It's
Interesting.
incredible.
Well, I discovered in my own journey through therapy that the reason why I was shy was because my parents always fought. And whenever
Yep.
I spoke up, my dad had the opinion that children should be seen and not heard.
Seen and not heard.
And if I cried, he would hit me with a 2x4.
Oh
And
gosh.
real men don't cry.
Yeah.
So even when I was in my 40s and my wife passed away, and I was standing there on the podium in front of the audience, you doing the eulogy, I couldn't cry.
Mm.
Couldn't cry through that whole time until
And that's
therapy.
really, really not good for you.
Until therapy, and I even ran away from home several times. And each time I came
Mm-hmm.
home, because I had to protect my sister from my dad
Yeah.
and his anger and other issues. And so I stayed there. I found also that I have several specific things, they have words on them, that I suffer from even today. One of them is catastrophism, which
Yep.
means the boss gives me a frown and I think, oh my God, I'm getting fired. That's
Yeah.
catastrophism. You immediately jump
That
to
that
the other end.
that goes back to that what you've just talked about, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
catastrophize, it's around, oh God, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
Immediately, this is bad.
Well, my mom
That
apparently
immediately.
my mom went through the Great Depression, and I looked at her age, and she only she did not go through the Great Depression, but her mom did. So she might be just
Mm.
carrying that over. And so everything was a catastrophe. And then, other things similar to that have names on them. Um, and I discovered one recently. I'm trying to remember it now. That oh yeah, I tend to address problems when they become problems rather than beforehand.
Being reactive rather than proactive.
Well, I wait till the last minute, and then it's a problem, and then
Yep.
I can fix it, and it's fixed. And
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously something that doesn't work well for planning a business. You know, I don't
Yeah.
have it. If you run out of customers, you need to go get customers before you start running out of customers. You shouldn't be going to get
Exactly.
customers after they're all gone.
Yes.
But I'm very,
Boy,
very
isn't
good at.
running a business a great learning curve?
Oh yeah. Oh boy, that's a whole. We could have a whole podcast on
Oh
that.
yeah.
But it's better to that puts you into the feast or famine mode of business, which
Mm-hmm.
is not a good place to be. I'm very, very good at handling emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
At Trader Joe's, when I worked there, we'd have an emergency, and I'd be right on top of it and handle it. And that was my whole job, was handling emergencies. Computers down, millions of dollars being lost every hour because the computers aren't working. I'd have teams in and get them all handled, stuff like that. I took active shooter classes, so I went to place in exercises on that, and disaster classes in 3 earthquakes, stuff like that. I've written books on survival. Um, so, but spotting that probably will change the rest of my life. Just that, because it's like, okay, that's the way my dad acted. I don't need to do that. I can
Yes.
instead,
And you don't have to wait for it to be a major problem to fix it, right? It's that forward thinking rather than that in the moment thinking.
I can put in procedures and things in place in my life so
Yeah.
that these things happen. And the catastrophism is it's just a mental thing. I don't have to deal with it. Okay, yeah, my
Mm.
boss frowns at me. I don't have a boss anymore, but the customer doesn't respond to an email like one is now. And my mind immediately goes, oh my God, my customer died from COVID. That's where my mind went. And I was
Right.
like,
Wow.
probably not. He tends to just get busy. He goes on long plane flights, and he has kids and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably just he just hasn't responded to the email for no apparent reason. But my mind is like COVID, um, which is stupid because COVID's over pretty much here in the States, at least.
Well, it's not stupid. It comes from something that you've learned. So it's never stupid. It's just a behavior. and when we recognize those behaviors and we have the awareness around them, then we're able to do something about them. So I love that you've got the awareness about it. And when that thought comes, do you then just go, hold on, is that a logical thought or is that a catastrophe thought? That's all you have to do once that happens, and take that moment to just that breath, where you go, just take that moment, go, oh no, that's okay, that's not logical, I don't have to worry about it. And then in that moment, what else could I do in this moment? And that might be, I'll just pop him an email and say, hey, haven't heard from you, hope all's well, when you get a moment, get back to me on this.
Oh, and then it gets worse
And
because
that's
he
all it
doesn't
is,
respond
right?
to that. He doesn't respond to that. So now it's even worse and getting the cycle. Um, Sometimes when nowadays I'll explain to my customer, just please respond to the email, and
Mm.
um, and sometimes there's one client who would never show up for meetings. I mean, she just goes to meetings and then she'd have some lame excuse. So I finally put in a $200 fine in the contract, and she accepted it. She even paid it a few times. But the flakiest client I've ever had just never showed up. She
Yeah, there
wouldn't
are
call,
clients like
wouldn't,
that.
yeah, I mean, nothing. And that's frustrating because you've allocated the time. You're all ready to go. You've done
Yep.
the pre-research. You're ready to have the discussion, and she just doesn't show up. Why? Because she forgot, or
Mm.
she's double booked something, or whatever. And um,
So is
sorry.
there a reminder system in place for that? Like, is there a text message that goes out an hour before the meeting saying, are you turning up today?
Right,
or
which
the day before the meeting,
I've
that sort
actually
of
had
thing.
her say 5 minutes before the meeting, yeah, I'll be there, and then just not show up.
Wow. Okay.
So
See, I would be firing that client
I
personally.
did.
I'd be
I did.
going, you know what? I can't work like this. You need to find somebody who can. And I think you might have trouble doing that. So either you need to change your behavior around this, or if this is what you want to achieve out of this, you need to change your behavior so that you can achieve it, or you're just not going to achieve it. It's up to you what your choice is, but I can't work like this.
It was one of my most fun, interesting projects ever that she had. So I was like really motivated to be
I
on that
hate that.
project. And I was getting paid well, although, I had to follow up on that like 40
Mm.
times. But that was fine. And the project was wonderful. The book I was writing was great. She never published it. It's been 3 years now. She paid for
Oh,
it.
that's sad.
It's a
Yeah.
wonderful book, children's book. Um, and she just gets distracted easily. And
Yeah. A lot
I
of creative
finally
people do.
find it's like, uh, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. Because
Mm,
I mean, even if she showed up on time, the not getting paid on time is a problem for a freelancer.
mm, mm.
So yeah, it's running a business is interesting. You've written a number of books I saw in your bio.
Yeah, I have. So there's the Balloon Principle book, which is all me. That one's all me. And that one is around raising your profile, impact, and influence through speaking. So through being that public speaker, that person who stands up in front of a group as a leader and speaks. And that one is a couple of years old now. So it's a few years old now. It actually was released just as COVID started. So my book launch had to be cancelled. We all went into lockdown, and we're all sitting there, and I'm going, I've just written a book on public speaking and no one's allowed to get together. That's going to work well, isn't it?
I had my own COVID
So,
frustration. Um,
yeah.
so
So I'm thinking that I'll do a relaunch on that one at some point.
probably a
But
good idea.
yeah, because otherwise, you put so much into it when you write a book, don't you? There's all the time and effort, and there's the money that it costs
Are you still there?
to do it and everything.
We seem to be having stalling problems. Are you still there?
Yes, you're back now. Looks like you're back. Well, no, he's left.
Hi.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
you're back. I
I
think we're back.
refreshed the screen. Yeah, these things are interesting. I had
Yeah.
my COVID story, which I thought was interesting. I'm a fan of WWE wrestling, worldwide wrestling, entertainment. or was a fan. It's gotten weird lately. Not that it other than always weird. And there was a wrestler there that I liked named Mankind, and he played three different parts, and he was the insane wrestler who came out in the straight jacket and was a nutcase. That was just an act. He became an author, and he's written 2 books about himself and probably 10 or 15 other novels after being a wrestler, and then he became a comedian. So he was
Oh,
playing
wow.
locally here in Tampa on April 1st, 2020. So I got a VIP ticket to meet him in the
Oh,
front row seat so I could talk to him and say hello, and do a typical meet and greet and whatever. And guess what happened?
gone,
Yeah,
gone.
that was a few days
It
after the
was, it was,
lockdowns.
it was a bizarre time in our world, wasn't it? It was really the most surreal experience to live through.
And I'm
I'm writing a novel at the moment that's set during COVID lockdown. So, and I will eventually finish it, but who knows how long. So, yes, that's the first book, was that one. I've also been in, I think it's 7 co-authored compilation type books around a whole lot of different things. One was, 2 of them are Voices of the 21st Century, which are books written by female public speakers and leaders, and compiled. My first one was around my experience of finding my voice again. The second one was around learning to listen to guidance, myself, my inner guidance, and be my own person, and to take time to look after me. I wrote one about the experience of suicide. There was a book called Touched by Suicide that was locally authored here, and it was from families of people who had suicide and how it had affected them moving forward, and what their learnings and their experiences were, and how you can help when somebody has been touched by suicide. What sort of things to do to help, because suicide is something that we basically don't talk about. Yeah, a whole lot of other ones, how to rise from adversity, all of those sorts of things. Letters to my 10-year-old self was one that we did as well, which was fabulous. All advice to ourselves if we were 10 again, what we would tell ourselves now, with
Mhm.
the benefit of hindsight, which is a wonderful thing. Yeah, no, just a whole lot of different things. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting being an author. I've done 60 books of my own plus 48 ghostwritten books. That's in 10 years. And because I recognized when I first started out as a ghostwriter, I can't use my ghostwritten works as references for most of the
Mm.
time, but I can use my own works. So I wrote my own books, and they're still there on Amazon. A couple of them became bestsellers in the Kindle world, Kindle bestsellers. I think one of them sold 15,000 copies in 3 days. I had a big markdown and a nice promotion. Um,
Yeah.
One of the 3 of the ghostwritten books have been traditionally published, and the rest were self-published. The traditional published ones did really well. In fact, I just realized that a 4th one was just published, and my author didn't tell me. And I just sent him a text message saying, "Damn it, you didn't tell me you got published." And he's like, "Oh, sorry." He was on sabbatical when it got published, so I said, "Okay, that's an excuse."
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, life is interesting because I started out hopeless when I was young because I couldn't foresee. I mean, back when I was in school, they taught metal shop as your career growth path. I mean, metal shop and auto shop and
I had
stuff.
home economics.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, that was the woman side was the home
Yeah.
economics and being, that was then, and the men took metal shop and
Hmm.
motor stuff and car stuff,
Woodwork. Yeah.
woodwork. Yeah, I got my tie stuck in a wood lathe and almost cut my head off. Don't wear a tie around a lathe. A lathe's the spinny thing that,
There's a good life lesson.
yeah, that was a good lesson. Like, listen to your teachers. Fortunately, it was a clip-on, so it didn't, do any damage. But good
Wow.
life lesson: listen to
Mm.
teacher. Sometimes they know what they're talking about. Um, so, um, and then I had the home life that was substandard. Let's just leave it at that. Some suboptimal, very. So I wanted to get out.
Mm.
Didn't know how. Then finally got a job. Became a VP of a company within a year. Stayed there a few years, and then a VP of a second company. I designed and wrote the water systems for Las Vegas Valley and Ojai, Connecticut, and New Haven, Connecticut, Ojai, California, and New Haven, Connecticut. And then went on to Trader Joe's for 20 years, and then thought I was going to die there because it was a great company. Thought it was going to just and then decided, nah, I don't want to die in corporate. I want
Yeah.
to go off and do something that I believe in, and ghostwriting and writing was, I've always wanted to be one, and now I am. And
You know
I
what?
had,
I find that a lot of authors have got a varied path to where they are. I'm doing a lot of work with book coaching now and helping people birth that book, because I'm sure you know that the first time that you write your book by yourself, it's pretty darn hard. And
oh yeah,
most people sort of stop partway through. So I'm helping people get through the whole process now. But I had a similar sort of thing. I started off as a nurse and then a midwife. So I did all my full nurses training, became a registered nurse, became a midwife, then ended up doing blood pathology collection. Sorry, stop it.
that's okay.
Sorry.
I didn't hear it.
Um, Ended up doing. Oh, I've got two dogs, and someone's walked in the backyard, and they've both gone nuts.
Yeah,
So I ended up
it's not
doing
coming over the
pathology.
audio, so don't worry about it.
Oh, good. Ended up doing pathology collections. Then from there, gave up on that altogether and became a fashion designer, and had a bridal business in creating haute couture bridal gowns for 15 years. Then had my babies, then got postnatal depression, and that's what started me in this journey through coaching and counseling. So I went counseling, went coaching, business studies, all of that sort of stuff, did all of those sorts of studies, and then moved from there. So it was that 20-year journey started basically when I had my children, of that doing the formal study into leadership and into what makes our brain tick and what makes us who we are and what makes us so special as human beings, every single one of us. And that's where it all came from. But now it's more, I'm continuing to write. I'm enjoying writing. I love it. But I certainly haven't done as much as you. I hope one day to have done as much as you, because I really love doing it. It feels like a fit for me. It feels like, not that anything else I ever didn't feel like a fit. At the time it did. But as society has moved on, as I've moved on, my career has moved on into different aspects as well. And I think that's what we do as authors.
I think that's what we do as people. If we're healthy, is life changes. I mean,
Mm.
I'm in my 60s now, and this is the age when you're supposed to retire. And there's no way I would even consider retiring now, assuming that I have my health, which I do. Um, I mean, never had surgery. Knock on wood. Not planning any. Been healthy most of my life, in spite of all the emotional and mental issues. Wife passing away, and toxic locations, and toxic people, and toxic jobs, and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I think if you're healthy, you grow and you make changes in your life. I think if you're not healthy, you stay. Well, I'm not sure if you're not healthy, but if you're doing better if you can change and accept change and grow as you grow, because otherwise you're
Yes.
just stuck in a rut, and
Yes.
that makes you vulnerable. If
Mm-hmm.
if you if you think, okay, I'm going to be hired by this company, I'm going to stay there till I die. Well, what if that company lays everybody off, like all the big companies are now? What if you get sick and can't work anymore? You could have all these what
Mm-hmm.
ifs. There's the
Because
catastrophism,
things
right?
change.
But
Yeah.
things change. Whereas if you get into the new gig economy, and you're doing Uber or something, or you've got a second job or a third job, and you've got your own, maybe in addition to your job, you're running your own company, maybe a small startup. You've got a little bit of leg room now. You've got a little room to grow. I mean, when I first started, I sold on eBay. I sold $35,000 worth of stuff, my stuff, in 1 year. I went into affiliate marketing. I sold $10,000 worth of other people's stuff in 1 year, in that same year. And then I realized that affiliate marketers aren't what I want to be, for various reasons, and that eBay is a lot of work because you got to ship it all,
Yeah.
but packaging it up and stuff. I mean, it's a great way. It's a great fallback. I got still a lot of stuff, and if necessary, I can sell stuff. Um, that's not my plan B. That's just the catastrophism kicking in again. But yeah, what am I going to
I
do
love
if I
that you
can't?
recognize it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I very much recognize it now. It
Mm.
makes it easier. I actually have a sense of humor about it. Oh yeah, that's just me doing that stupid thing again, you know, and it goes away. And I work on my model kits, work on hobbies. I think fantasy miniatures. I write. These things all get rid of those. I didn't mention all the 5 different things that I found that I do. Don't need to. We're not psychoanalyzing me. But when those things happen, I go jump on a hobby or take a walk or I call up some friend or I do something to
Mhm.
kick it out of my space. Because if I sit there,
Perfect.
this is the thing that affects most people is they keep thinking about it, and
Mhm.
the mental story you have going on in your life forms your life. So if you start
Yes.
thinking there's a catastrophe coming, don't be surprised if one shows up.
Yes.
Whereas if you start thinking,
Yes.
okay, it's not really a catastrophe, it's certainly not there yet. I mean, it's going to be a long time before I'm destitute on the streets, given from where I am now, although that's where my mind is going. Um, so let's even not look at the end and let's just look at what do I need to do now?
What's
Yeah,
the next best step? Yeah.
the customer frowned at me. Okay, like you said, well, send him an email. Don't have my mind go to oh my God, the customer's mad and he's going to drop me and not pay the bill and I'm going to not be able to do this and this and this and life's going to collapse and then it's going to steamroll because I'm going to become. It's like, oh, don't need to do that. That's just mental, and
Mm.
it is mental, and you don't have to do that to yourself. And that's all I was doing. So I turn
It
it
just
off.
uses up your energy, right?
It spends your energy and it causes those negative things to actually become more possible.
Yep.
And that's the problem with catastrophism and other things like that. And catastrophism isn't in the DSMH. Um, that's the
It's a
psychiatric manual.
behavior. It's
It's
it's not a
just
psychiatric illness, it's a behavior.
it's just
And
a
it's a behavior that you've got to remind yourself that you're stepping into and make yourself step out of
I think they would
in the
classify it
moment.
as a neurosis, perhaps
Mm.
at the best
A
cases.
behavior that's part of neurosis, yes.
Yeah, and that's fine. Everybody's got them. But I fight neuroses or behaviors. Like I'm a little bit scared of heights. I used to go up in a hot air balloon every year.
Terrified of them.
Yeah, and I was terrified
As a
because it's
kid. Yeah,
a little bit of plywood and a basket, and I'm up in the air and like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And it was exhilarating. It was fun. I used to be a little bit claustrophobic. I then became a cave crawler, a spelunker,
yeah,
and started
yeah.
crawling around caves. That was hard because I had a kilometer of rock over me,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Carlsbad
And
Caverns
that's
is
what
great.
happens, right?
Carlsbad
Yeah.
Caverns is great if you want to fight claustrophobia because you go through these little tunnels and then you come up to this huge cavern that's literally 300 feet high, 1,000 feet long and 400 feet wide, and it's got a hotel in the middle, just a one-room hotel in the middle, a restaurant. So you've got this mixture of short spaces and bad spaces. It's really good for fighting.
That plays with your mind. It makes your mind go, wait on, where am I? And when you can confuse your mind like that because something's in the wrong space, it actually can help you deal with what it is that you're dealing with in that space as well. So that claustrophobia sense, that sense of being closed in, you've gone into a hotel, which is a normal, everyday type occurrence, being in a building. So that sense of being closed in, you kind of forget it because you're in your building, right? And then you walk back out of the building and go, oh, wait, oh, that's right, I'm still in here. So that it kind of makes your mind change the way that it looks at it. And you have to do it more than once. Generally, one experience won't fix it, although my balloon flying experience did change my perception of flying in balloons completely because I was terrified of them. But going up in the balloon was the most beautiful, exhilarating feeling. That was quite a few years ago now. And now I go, oh gosh, I wouldn't mind going up in a balloon again, but I'm a bit worried about it. And so it's still there, right? So you've got to keep doing it. You've got to keep consciously working on whatever the thing is that you're working on. You can't just do it once and go, oh, I'm cured. For most of us, that's not how it works. For most of us, it is that being conscious of it, continuing to work on it, continuing to grow through it. And, that's the thing about life is that we as humans, we will learn how to deal with something. And then because we don't deal with it for a while, we kind of slide backwards a bit.
Yep,
And then we have to
over
learn it
time.
again, relearn it and relearn it. And until it becomes a natural pathway in our brain, which takes a lot of time,
Uh,
particularly if that pathway was formed as a tiny child.
on a related subject, I was terribly shy. We started this conversation,
Mm.
and when my wife passed away, I'd spent 12 and a half years supporting a woman who was chronically ill and a job that was very tough. So I was caved in, which made the The shyness even worse. I mean, I was
Yep.
painfully introverted, painfully shy. I couldn't talk to anybody. I mean, other than at work, because I was the leader, at work, so I could talk at work. So I decided, okay, I'm full of grief. I'm terribly shy. I'm horribly introverted. My senses are all in my head instead of being out there in the world, and I don't like this feeling at all. So I picked up a camera and started photographing. And I went to first all the national parks in the Southern California area and took lots and lots and lots of pictures, expanded my horizons. Started attending Renaissance fairs. I don't know if you have those over there. We have little festivals that are
Yep.
like Renaissance era. And there was a local one. So I attended that. They started to know me. They accepted me as part of their family, and they're like a circus family. So it's the same concept where they're all very close, tight knit. I was the photographer of the group. And then one day, photographing the belly dancers, the colors and the swirling and stuff all kind of made me feel better. And one of them comes up to me. Her name is Marjani, still a dear friend, but I was in this tight little world. And she comes up and she puts her arms around me, and I'm like terrified because she's full of tattoos. Never knew tattoos before, She's got piercings and scary to me, conservative guy, and says, "We like the pictures you put on the internet. We'd like you to keep going. We want to invite you to the front row center seat. And I will introduce you to every belly dancer that I can." And before long, I had done 1,200 belly dance show um, photo shoots and done 300 Renaissance fairs and WWE. I photographed WWE for a while and photographed the world's first first world annual mermaid beauty pageant. I was the photographer for that. That was really interesting. Achieved a bucket list item. Met 2 supermodels and had lunch with them, which was very interesting because I didn't expect it, but they were very nice. And had a party every year with like 100 dancers come and dance for me with their husbands sitting in the corner being bored because they'd seen these same belly dance moves 50 million times. And the shyness broke.
Mm.
I'm not the least bit shy. I'll go up to a gang member and I'll just ask him about his tattoos. Because that's always something you can ask somebody who has tattoos about. Hey, what's the story behind those tattoos? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, "Oh, blah 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 blah," and they'll be little tuck 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 tuck. So I perceived that I had what I've considered a problem, and I came up with a kind of innovative solution and solved it. And now I
Yep.
don't have it anymore. The introversion's a little different. That one, after COVID and stuff. I mean, I was like, COVID, cool. We're locked down. That's great. I'm a ghostwriter. I don't care. I can work at home now. It's not weird anymore. And anyway, that's
Once I'm hoping you can hear me. My microphone has just given me a fault sound.
yeah,
Are you
it's
able to hear me?
getting a little bit of feedback, but we are coming up on an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's
Sorry, I'm
probably
not quite sure what happened then. It just suddenly sent me a there's a problem note. So I'm
too
trying
much
to.
talking going on, too much hot air.
Actually, we've worn it out.
Could be. I think we're coming up on the end anyway. Is there any final words you want to say?
Mm. No, I just look. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for chatting. I really, really enjoyed talking with you.
Me
And,
too.
I think that we all have so many stories and so much to share. And a lot of people just don't take the time to sit and have a conversation these days. But it's in those conversations that the real gold just comes out. So I guess my last thing that I'd really like to say to people is talk, get
Yep.
together,
Yep.
talk, sit down, spend time together and learn about each other, ask the questions, listen to each other, and be open to discovering more and more about each other. Because in doing that, we build community, and in building community, we build a better world. So that's kind of probably my takeaway
Yep.
for today.
I agree. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. This has been The Writing King. As I said, I'm a ghostwriter, book coach, and a LinkedIn branding expert. And it's been great having you on the show. If you could hang on after I turn off the recording, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you.
Where is there?